Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 49 for Thursday, December 4th. My name is Farbod Merkazi. It's conference championship week, but before we get into that, it's my honor, it's my privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you my soon-to-be future co-host, former co-host, and the future head coach of your Penn State Nittany Lions, Jace Hatfield. Jace, how are we doing, buddy? This is breaking news. Personally, I'm not going to lie to you. I got the interview offer from Pat Kraft a couple days ago, and I turned it down because I knew how much you wanted this job. Do you have any thoughts on what your first days as the Penn State head coach are going to be?
Yeah, I promised to get this recruiting class up. I'm going to take us out of 150th. I've been recruiting a few kids just to get us out of 2 commits, just to try to field a legal roster. That's step 1. Also, step 2 might be going to the dentist. AI did me dirty.
Did you pretty dirty? Well, on that note, if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're just listening on Apple Podcasts, please check it out. I mean, listen to the rest of the show, but I put up a little AI thing of Jace. But on that note, Jace, obviously there's plenty to celebrate. We'll have to celebrate your job offer. We'll have to celebrate it's conference championship week. We'll have to celebrate it's early national signing day today. We're going to talk about the mess that's the Penn State coaching search that we just had a little fun with right now. I mean, there is an aspect of, I've heard someone today say, is it a mess or do they have something up their sleeve? Because that's the only reason they would have let signing day come and go without a head coach. We're going to have to get into all that. Jace, I'm going to also give you a chance to celebrate your win of Shot in the Bark on this show. I won the picks as always, not as always. And then we have to break down the SEC championship, the Big Ten championship. We're going to talk about potential ACC chaos. Could the ACC champ not get into the playoffs? We'll talk about the College Football Playoff Committee, the poll selection Sundays this weekend. There's so much going on. Make sure you're tuned in, not only on here on YouTube at Flag for Discussion spelled out, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify at Flag for Discussion spelled out. We are on Twitter at F4 Discussion. A lot of great tweets coming out of there, by the way. And on TikTok at Flag 4 Discussion. Jace, I'm going to hand it to you as the future Penn State head coach in your last few days on the pod. Actually, are you going to continue to do the pod as the Penn State head coach?
I think I can keep this one in the schedule. I'll make some time.
Matt Rule does his own pod as the Nebraska head coach. There's no way you can't do this one.
He might want to focus on coaching, or I'm going to go belt to them again.
You don't listen to the House Rules pod? All right. That said, Jace, give the listeners a breakdown of how our picks in the regular season ended.
All right. As you mentioned, Farbod, you had won our yearly pick'em. You broke the 50 win mark, so congratulations. You had a great 4-1 week at 50, 44-1. And then I had a horrible final week. I went 1-4. Which unfortunately put me under 500, 46, 48-1. So we're going to jump to Shot in the Bark. Not much to defend myself there. Shot in the Bark, I barely eked you out. I had 13 points. You had 12. Also, I wrote this down because I wanted to shout out some of our darlings. SMU got both of us an outright win this year, which was pretty impressive as 2-scorer underdogs. So shout out SMU, 2 big upset wins that we both correctly identified that week. And then also just shout out the ACC in general. They had 3 outright winners for me in the ACC, and then just 1 blanket cover. I don't know I guess it was the ACC chaos that I was bought into this year, and that worked out well in my favor. So I wanted to shout out the ACC. Thank you guys. You did me well. Unfortunately, at the cost of your conference having a legitimate shot at a national championship and/or even a playoff spot, which we might talk a little bit about more here on the show. And then lastly, the F4D parlay. We hit a week 3 parlay. It was our only hit on the season. A little bit sad. We got cold towards the end of the year. Finished 1 for 14. That put us, we were over, if we had bet we were 55% on our legs on the year. So had we just bet singles for every leg, we would have also just barely broken even. We also barely broke even. If you do the math, I think we were both like just under $1.25 profitable each. So I was gonna say go buy a gumball, but I don't even know if you can do that these days with $1.25. But So $1.25 more for us. Maybe we'll throw it on some parlay this weekend and hope for the best. But that wraps it up for the picks.
I think that's definitely what we'll do. By the way, kids today don't know what gumballs are anymore. Jace, we talked about the ACC a little bit. Let's get into some playoff teams instead. The SEC Championship, number 3 Georgia, 2.5-point favorites against number 9 Alabama. This is Saturday night or evening, 4 Eastern on ABC. This is obviously, it's Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is the matchup that you alluded to before we started recording. It's once this game is played and the winner has won, the last 11 of the last 12 SEC champions will be either Alabama or Georgia. This game is full of storylines. Georgia got beat for the first time since before COVID by Alabama this season at home. Alabama's gone out. They've done really well in some games. They had a couple scares. Georgia's never looked extremely dominant, but they've kind of just, I don't know, they've taken care of business. It's been a Kirby Smart team, just a little bit less thereof. Kirby's 1-7 against Alabama, Jace. Where do we start the breakdown?
Let's start right there. Yeah, 1-7 against Alabama. And if you go back to that lone win, it was in the 2021 national championship game. But if you remember who they lost to, their singular loss that season, it was Alabama. Now the game scenarios are different. Their first loss to Alabama was in the SEC championship, and they avenged it in the national championship. But their one loss this year, Alabama in the regular season, they get a rematch in the SEC championship. Can he rewrite history, or is Alabama going to get a chance? And we'll give Kirby some credit. That was mainly the Nick Saban Alabama days, and you're going to be hard pressed to find a coach with any sort of impressive record against Nick Saban. But it'll be interesting to see if he can get over the hump. Kalen DeBoer's already got himself off to a good start against Georgia. And then something interesting too, if you're Georgia, I don't even like, this isn't saying that Georgia's going to want to lose this game by any means necessary. But losing the game, if you're Georgia, puts you in probably the 5 to 7 seed range, barring what goes on with where they jump Alabama and then what happens with the other teams. That's really not a bad consolation prize at all. Like we as Oregon fans can tell you we didn't like the bye, and it's not as great of a gift as it seems to be. So even if you're a Georgia fan and you take a heartbreaking loss, it would suck. You want to beat Alabama. All of the feeling and emotions of losing a conference championship game against a team you want to beat is there. But getting that home playoff game, really not a bad consolation prize. So not the end of the world if you're Georgia if you lose this one. Now, if Alabama loses, the question goes to you. I was laying in my recliner yesterday, and I was thinking to myself,
Ooh,
how comfortable is the Alabama seat, right? Like, is it like are they laying in a recliner right now? Like, could they lose by 30 and still have a seat in the playoff? Or is this a wooden share? Like, do they need to come out and compete? Like, where do you see Alabama's scenario if they go down?
I don't think this is a win or you're out scenario for Alabama, but I do think there is an aspect of just how they lose matters to the committee, because the committee has shown us and we'll have plenty of conversation once we get to the actual rankings, but what the committee has shown us, that despite them telling us at the beginning of the year that all these criteria matter, head-to-head matters, strength of schedule matters, they're only basing this off of the eye test. So I think it is pretty important that Alabama is still at 9. Like, it might sound elementary, but I feel like if they were at 10 or 11 in the college football playoff committee poll, a loss would kick them out, especially with a Miami rearing down on them or a BYU with a win rearing down on them. Now, you are risking, let's say BYU beats Texas Tech, Georgia beats Alabama handedly, Miami and Notre Dame aren't playing this week. The committee ends up having to have a conversation of, okay, Miami is close enough. We need to find a spot. They beat Notre Dame outright. Let's put them in there. Let's put BYU in there because they won. Now Alabama's the odd man out. So I don't think a loss kicks them out, but I also think if they lose, they are going to be rooting for a lot of things to not happen behind them, so other teams don't take their spot.
Agreed. I think Alabama can't lose in an embarrassing fashion and then have BYU win, right? I think that would arguably take them out. I think even if they lose, as long as they keep it relatively close, they're going to be in. And this is based off of what the committee has shown us, not particularly like giving our thoughts on the situation quite yet. We'll get more into that later. But based on what the committee has shown us, I think obviously a win they're in and a close or even semi-comfy loss, they're probably going to be safe. But if they lose by multiple scores and BYU wins and Virginia wins, things start to get really interesting. So if you're Alabama, obviously just don't even play with the fire and go get the win. It's interesting too. You bring up a good point of the committee talking about resume really matters. Who you've lost to matters. The Alabama's kind of the team. They have that 14-point loss earlier in the year to Florida State, and they've kind of, by the graces of the committee, that's been not talked about quite a bit. And I think if you were to start comparing them to some of these other 2-loss teams, if Alabama's a 3-loss team and you start looking at losses, your best win, does it lose meaning winning that Georgia game earlier in the year, really early in the year, if you lose to them by 14 points now? Does that win kind of deteriorate in the sense of you were a better team back then, but not so much anymore? And then if you want to talk about being a better team, then hey, that was around the time you lost to Florida State by 14. So it'll be a very interesting, intense conversation for the committee. I think the Alabama logo is definitely going to go a long ways in their favor for getting a playoff spot or not. The obvious answer here is just don't lose or lose in a tight one and don't question it. But it's not super comfy. I see some people just penciling them in the playoff. I don't know if I would do that.
If I were to give Kalen DeBoer any advice, it'd be win. It's not that hard. Just win the game.
Get the job done, Kalen.
Yeah. So on that note, though, game-wise, and this is a game that happened September 27th of this year. It happened in Athens. Alabama went in there. They took a big lead in the first half. Georgia did what they did pretty much all year, is start out playing with their food in the first half, fall behind, end up coming back. It was too little too late, though, for their comeback. There were a couple plays they could have had that would have either leading to a tie game or for them to take the lead over Alabama in that game, but they just didn't execute. They didn't make the throw. They didn't make the catch. That happens. But the game in its entirety finished 24-21. Both teams, though, in the last, I don't know, however many weeks, they've had spurts where they look like, oh man, that team can go win a national title to me. But they've also had spurts of, are they going to be out in the first round? Because it feels like Alabama has played the season, or at least playing games against teams that are much lesser than them. Let's take the lead and just hold it instead of go play your football. Go play Alabama football. Ryan Williams, he's been a mystery all year. Where's Ryan Williams? They've really been missing that deep threat offensively. And Ty Simpson has looked pretty human since the middle of the season, when he was honestly projected to be a top 5 NFL draft pick, which I thought was crazy, but that's how good he was playing at the time. That was when he was top 1, 2, or 3 in Heisman voting. That I thought was a little bit more warranted. He was playing out of his mind. But he's gotten more pedestrian. Gunnar Stockton, I think every one of his lines looks pedestrian, but I don't think Georgia needs him. Like, they don't have an offense that requires a quarterback to have a crazy game to win a game. They need a quarterback to not make mistakes, complete the passes that are called, and get them out of trouble when they fall into trouble. But for me, the biggest keys are which team has a better run game. Alabama lost Jam Miller. I should probably check out the injury report. Alabama lost Jam Miller against Auburn last week. If Georgia can run that ball, it's really hard. I don't know. I've gone back and forth on who I think is going to win this game. But it's really hard to beat a team twice in 1 year, especially when you beat them the first time on the road at their home, and they're going to come out pissed off.
Yeah, I agree. And I just hit a milestone. First ever eyelash in the eye on the podcast. So bear with me if you're watching this on YouTube here. All right. But kind of to go off your point, I completely agree with the ground game. Both of the ground games have gotten better as of late. Georgia's gives me a little bit more confidence. They've been more steady, but neither ground game has really been elite or over the top this year. And in big games, Georgia's has shown up enough to get wins. Alabama's, I would say, in both of their losses, the ground game was nowhere to be found. And I thought that's how people could start getting to Ty Simpson, and that's where things went shaky on offense. But both Gunnar and Ty Simpson have kind of struggled as of late. Last week when Georgia played Georgia Tech, Gunnar Stockton was 11 of 21 for 70 yards, only just over 3 yards per attempt. Threw a touchdown, but also threw a pick, took 2 sacks. And then in the prior week to Charlotte. Did not throw a touchdown, but threw a pick. And then on the other side, Ty Simpson, he threw 2 picks against Eastern Illinois. He threw a pick against Oklahoma. And then the O-line for Alabama has struggled. He took 3 sacks against Auburn, and he's only 19 of 35, also with just over 3 yards per attempt against Auburn, all because of QB hurries and having to either throw the ball away, dump it off, or make a quick throw. And then he took 4 sacks against Oklahoma. So on Alabama's end, I don't think it's been a Ty Simpson issue. I don't think it's necessarily him, but it's people getting to him quickly, getting to him easily, in which case you're forcing a young quarterback to throw into traffic. You're forcing him to throw it away. And then, once that, we all know it, once college quarterbacks get pressured a lot, they start seeing ghosts, and then who knows what's going to happen from there. Georgia's defensive line, newsflash, is going to be really good. It's Georgia. It's Kirby Smart. It's a big game. They're going to get to the quarterback. It's just what they do. Alabama offensive line's going to have to improve because the offensive line did enough to beat Auburn. It didn't look good against Eastern Illinois, but it's Eastern Illinois, and it was not good enough to beat Oklahoma. They lost that game at home. If you want to beat Georgia in Atlanta in the SEC championship game, it can't be subpar. You can't give up 4 sacks. You can't give up 15 QB hurries. And then Georgia, the other end, they've kind of had to flip. Their offensive line's been all right. Gunnar Stockton's been a little bit more of the holding back of the offense. But as you mentioned, that offense doesn't rely on a lot of Gunnar Stockton making plays and throwing for 300 yards. Whereas the Alabama offense, it does. That's the Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb offense. It relies on downfield passing. It relies on big explosive plays. Alabama has the wide receivers to do it. Ty Simpson has the arm to do it. They have the scheme in place. It's just, can they buy enough time against Georgia to let those plays develop and happen? That's going to be the big question mark, especially because Georgia's secondary they've struggled this year. It's a young secondary. They've had their issues.
That whole defense has not looked like your normal Georgia, at least what we accustomed to be Georgia. That we accustomed Georgia to get after you. Against Alabama the first time at home, they didn't touch Ty Simpson once. That
Clean
was also
jersey.
without. Yeah, he had a clean jersey. He was able to sit back in the pocket. He was able to make the plays where he needed, and the rest was history. It was a 3-point game. Georgia had the only turnover in that game. Like, Georgia had the better run game. Simpson had the better game overall. If Georgia can get to Ty Simpson, it's going to be really hard for Alabama to do anything. Point blank, period. And Georgia's defense has looked a lot more like a traditional good defense in college football, where they might not start out gelled up, but by the middle to the end of the year, they'll figure things out. The coaches know how to scheme them up a little bit better. The players are more comfortable in the system they get after the quarterback. I say that because what we're accustomed to seeing Georgia is the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line is what the Georgia Bulldogs defense has been the last 3 years. I don't know. I think we're saying a lot of things about why Georgia's going to win this game. I think it's extremely plausible that Alabama walks in there and they do the same thing they've done to Georgia for for years now. And I know it's been a different coach. Or Kalen DeBoer. We talked about this last time Alabama-Georgia played. Kalen DeBoer walks in there and he said, I'm 3-0 against Dan Lanning. Where'd Dan Lanning come from? Kirby Smart defensive tree. I'm 3-0 against him. Now he's 1-0 against Kirby. Remember, Kalen DeBoer has lost to Mike Norvell and some other mid coaches, but he's beaten Sark. He's beaten Dan Lanning. He's beaten Kirby Smart. He's beaten the best of the best, but his losses always have come against like unranked teams, at least. There's absolutely a world where Alabama walks in there and does the same thing they did to Georgia the first time they played. Takes a big lead early on and just tries to hold on.
Yeah, absolutely. If they keep Ty Simpson upright and he has time, Alabama wide receivers they have the upper hand against Georgia's secondary. Like I said, it's a young secondary. They're opportunistic at times, but they're young. That's where Ty Simpson, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, that's going to be their bread and butter. And like the first time around where he was upright most of the game, they were able to throw the ball downfield. And not only is that hard to stop at any point in the game, that's a good recipe if you need a comeback. If you can keep them upright, you have the offense to make a 2-minute drive if you have the ball last. Even if it's a tie game, you go kick a field goal. You have an offense that can do that. You worry about that with Georgia. Georgia's not necessarily a team that's going to take the top off you. If Georgia's got the ball last with 1:30 left, 1 timeout, you worry about their ability to move the ball quickly downfield and get into field goal range. Alabama, you don't. So I do think it's going to come. Alabama didn't run the ball well their first time around, and they won that game because of the downfield passing attack. That's going to be Alabama's recipe to win. And if they're able to keep Ty upright, that could be a long day for the Georgia secondary. And it's going to be interesting because I think that's going to be the strategy. I don't think we're going to get a lot of Alabama running the football unless they have to because of like they're up 30 or something. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that. On the other end, I think Georgia's going to play the exact opposite. I think Georgia's going to try and run the ball 40 minutes of the 60 minutes of this game, keep Alabama on the sidelines. So you're going to get two very contradictory play styles. It feels like a Tom Izzo, Matt Painter college basketball game for all you sickos like me too. Who controls the pace? Who controls the style of the game? That's going to be who wins. And in football, you control that in the trenches. That's getting to the quarterback. It's blitzing six and stopping a run. It's that kind of thing.
All right, Jace, who you got?
I've gone back and forth on this one, and this is probably the game I feel the least confident in. I'm going to take Georgia to get the win in Atlanta, but I think it's going to be a close. I think it's going to be like a three-score game, something like that. Or three-point game, sorry, not three-score.
I was about to ask you. I think it's close. 21. All right, for me, I, like you, have been going back and forth on who I think is going to win. I personally believe it's extremely hard for any team to beat the same team twice in 1 year, especially because theoretically, I know this is a neutral site. This is at Mercedes-Benz. Like, this is still in Georgia's still going to have the upper hand. They're 40 minutes out from the stadium. Alabama fans will travel well. They'll get there, but Georgia's going to have the ease of travel. I think it's hard to beat a team twice in 1 year. I picked Alabama to win the SEC at the beginning of the year. This is my one live dog. I'm going to take them. I think Alabama's going to win. I think Alabama will cover that 2.5 by winning, and we won't have to worry about Alabama falling out of the playoff and dealing with the SEC commissioner and getting mad about that if that happens. With that said, I think if you are, like you said at the beginning of this segment, if you're Oregon, you're a big Georgia fan this weekend because they're out of the unlikely scenario that Georgia loses, they get pushed down to 5, and Oregon, just because they didn't get to play in the conference title game, gets thrown into 4. Man, that means they won't play for about 33 days since their last game, or so 32, something like that. And that is not what you want if you want a good chance to win. Now, let's talk about the game that Oregon didn't get into because they lost to one of these teams. The Big Ten championship game, number 1, Ohio State, 4.5-point favorite against Indiana, number 2, Indiana. This is Saturday, 8 Eastern on Fox. Look, there's all kinds of stats that'll tell you how big of a game this is. This is the first ever matchup between number 1 and number 2 in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State hasn't won a Big Ten championship since 2020. Indiana has lost 30 in a row to Ohio State. They haven't beaten them since 1988. Indiana trails the all-time series 81-12-5. I mean, this is probably the battle for the Heisman. I know you love Jacob Rodriguez, but it's an MVP award. It's a quarterback award. It's going to be between Julian Say and Fernando Mendoza at this point, depending on who has a big game. Now, the take I heard today is maybe Ohio State, what's the benefit in winning for them? Because do they want the bye? Do they need to effort themselves extremely much? They're rolling, just keep rolling, do the same thing you did last year. And I think it's crazy town. You want to win your conference championship, especially Ohio State hasn't won the championship since 2019.
Yeah, 2020, the COVID year, but we can call that like an asterisk fake, kind of a fake one there. But either way, I think for both these teams, win or lose, you have a bye. Like, I don't know if that changes for either of them. So you're almost just playing like purely for pride at this point. Indiana, it's everything you said. You haven't won since 1988. You're down 81-12-5 in this series. You've lost 30 in a row, and the Heisman, right? Like, I think everybody in both those locker rooms kind of knows, hey, like, if we win this game, we get our guy a Heisman. And so I think both teams are going to play for a lot of pride, which kind of makes this game exciting because it's going to be fiery when guys are kind of playing with their hearts more than. Not that they're not going to be playing intelligently or, with good schematics and all that, but like, not much changes win or lose this game in terms of the outcome and your potential of winning a national championship. It's also one of those games where Indiana, maybe like for either of these teams, when you're undefeated, it's not the worst thing in the world to get your first loss out before the playoff. Learn what it means to get punched in the mouth. Sometimes it's best for your young team to learn what that means and what that feels like. So it's really not the end of the world for either team to lose. And when you look at like statistically, it's almost impossible to find an edge when you narrow down, okay, I'm trying to pick a winner, or I want to see who's going to win. Both of them are just so dominant in every stat. Like Ohio State, what is it, 7.8 points per game against? They have the number one completion rate in the country, the number one adjusted completion rate, the number one offensive success rate. They're top 5 in EPA offense. They average 5 yards a carry. Like they just do everything incredibly well offensively and defensively. And Indiana's, whenever a stat says Ohio State is number 2 or top 5, go to Indiana. They're probably number 1 in that. It's almost impossible to find much of an edge analytically. The stats don't really give you much of an edge. Like the situation, this team doesn't mind losing, but this one doesn't give you an edge. It's really hard to find anything in this game that's going to feel confident. I don't know if you've found an edge yet, but I'd love to hear it if you have.
No, I think everything tangible is stupid when trying to break down this game. I think Ohio State is the best team in the country. I think somehow they are better than they were last year, despite losing all of the players that they did to the NFL, despite losing both coordinators, despite like this not that this was a step back year for them, but it was a reload year for them. They have a young quarterback. They still have they have a couple young receivers. They have a brand new defensive line. Caleb Downs is the only one that's like, man, that's the first top 5 pick just because of the age. Ohio State has proven so much, and I talked so much about it on our recap show on Monday. But Ohio State, Matt Patricia, Ryan Day having the guts to go higher. Matt Patricia is not a popular name in football circles, especially in NFL circles, but especially in college football circles where he hasn't had experience. That guy took over a situation where he's been calling defenses, complicated defenses, for 25 to 38-year-old guys. Not necessarily like saying that college guys are stupid, but college guys haven't been exposed to a lot. And he's walked in and it's been seamless. He knows what to call. He has a complicated like packages that he's like deploying out there. That defense, every team I think has been held under 18. The offense for Indiana is ridiculous. That's the matchup for me is which one gives. Is Indiana's offense going to find ways to get around, or is Matt Patricia going to get to Fernando Mendoza? Fernando Mendoza and that offense, they rely on getting the ball out quick. They're an RPO-based offense. But does that secondary being so good for Ohio State, the keep Elijah Surratt like covered up and make Fernando Mendoza have to hold the ball a little bit longer? Do they get to him? And at that point, is Indiana in trouble? Or, like I said, because tangible facts and stats are stupid breaking down this game, is Curt Cignetti going to pull a Curt Cignetti? And that's my debate, because at this point, I've chosen never to be surprised by something Curt Cignetti does again, because he's just proven that he's a damn good ball coach, and Indiana's rolling, man. Indiana's offense is good. Indiana's defense is solid. They can beat anybody in the country, in my opinion. I mean, here's a question for you. Last year, I think it would honestly just be inspiring too. Indiana last year, they played a really good regular season, got into the playoff, got beat, and it kind of confirmed to everybody what everybody was saying already about them. Like, you're just here because your schedule was bad. Well, their schedule wasn't great this year, but at least they went to Oregon. They beat Oregon on the road and kind of handled them. How cool of a story would they be if Indiana goes into this game and beats Ohio State?
It would be amazing. It would cap off one of the greatest the greatest season in Indiana football history. It would really cement like Curt Cignetti as maybe the premier coach in the Big Ten ? In terms of, hey, I went into Autzen, I beat Dan Lanning. First regular season loss he's had in the Big Ten. I beat Ryan Day in the Big Ten championship game. First loss they've had all year. First loss they've had since Michigan last year. I think this really would set them over. And maybe now that we're talking about this and you make these great points, maybe the edge in this game is there's a little bit more to win and gain for Curt Cignetti getting this win. than there is for Ryan Day getting this win. There's a world where if you're Ohio State, you've won the national championship last year and you didn't win the Big Ten championship. You didn't even play in it. But if you're Curtis Signetti, when's the last time Indiana won a Big Ten championship? That's a stat we don't have prepared, but that number is going to be old. And India has a chance to flip the script on that. They have a chance to change the narrative. I think Curt Signetti has a chance to say, we're not just fun Indiana. We are like serious, fearful Indiana. And this is a game where you have an opportunity to do that, where I don't think Ohio State has nearly as much to prove other than like they're as good as we all, I would say, think, but I think we all know that they're that good. So I don't know if Ohio State has quite as much to prove. Now, with that being said, Ohio State, as we both mentioned, they look unbelievable. They have top 5 draft pick wide receivers. They have first round wide receivers behind him. They've got elite tight ends. They have an elite offensive line. They have a really good freshman running back. They have a really good defense as Caleb Downs, who's arguably the best defensive player in the country for the second year in a row. Like it's not like this is just some slouch team. It's Ohio State. It's really hard. You really do go back and forth here. I think Indiana's the fun story. And whenever you tell yourself, oh, maybe Indiana would be fun, Ryan Day is a good coach. You know he's not going to come in there and lay a flop or lay an egg in this game. These are the kind of games where when you want edges over each other, this is the first matchup between Signetti and Ryan Day. You want that edge. You want to win match 1 against them. You want to set the precedent that you own them, quote unquote. Like you want to set that precedent. And this is the game for both of them to kind of do that.
Exactly. By the way, Indiana has won 2 Big Ten football championships in 1945 and 1967. They haven't won a Big Ten football championship since 1967. What were you doing that year, bro?
My parents weren't even born, so nothing.
In saying all of this is, I think Indiana has a path to win it. No doubt. They are dangerous. There's a reason they are undefeated. My pick for this game is going to be Ohio State, and I don't think it, like, I don't need to bat a second eye at this. Like, I think Ohio State, like I said, defensively, they've stymied everybody. Not that they've had the best schedule, but they've had a pretty tough. They've had a solid schedule at least. They've stymied everybody, and offensively, I said this in our recap show. I'll say it again. That defense is the reason the offense has developed so smoothly. That defense, because it's so good, it's allowed Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, even though he's going to USF now, Brian Hartline, Ryan Day, Julian Sain to kind of gel. Bring in the new offensive lineman, gel that core. As the receivers, it does help the fact that Julian Sain, when he drops back, at least 20% of the time, Jeremiah Smith's down there like, throw me the ball, I'm wide open. He's throwing the ball against the air sometimes. I think Ohio State is going to be that team that most teams in the country do not want to face or have on their side of the bracket in the playoffs. Look, they could get beat in the playoff. They could get beat by teams that are equal or good footing. That's a team that like no one wants to play.
Yeah, I agree. I think Indiana over the last couple weeks has shown there's some film out there on Indiana is what I'm getting at, saying that will give you a little bit of a blueprint, how to stop their offense, how to score a little bit on their defense. It's not perfect, it's not rocket science, it's not easy to replicate, but there's a little bit of film that says, hey, this is how you kind of poke and prod at Indiana. Ohio State does not have that. No one has that from them. So if you're the rest of the country, you kind of want to see a world where Indiana scores 24 plus points. You kind of want to see a world where they move the ball on them. You also kind of want to see a world where they figure out how to slow down Julian Sain because, well, granted, he's finishing every game with a clean jersey. That's probably step 1. But Ohio State doesn't have that film. So I'm with you. I'm going to pick Ohio State. I just think they're too good and too dominant. And it'll be a fun game, and I'll be happy for Indiana for sure if they win. It's hard to pick against Ohio State right now. But as you know, I'll speak out of the Oregon fan in me as a team probably might see him in the playoff. I hope to see some weakness out of Ohio State because I'm yet to see that. And it is championship football week, and we have not seen a weakness out of this team. So hoping to see a little bit of it. I don't think it'll happen though.
Look, I invite Chris Signetti to tell us that we're wrong and go beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten title game. Last year, right before Oregon was playing Penn State in the Big Ten title game, Chris Signetti was on the field on like Big Ten Network interviewing. He's like, yeah, I figured I'd come out here because we're going to be playing this game next year. Like, I love that gravitas. I love that confidence. Like, he knew that at least he would have the opportunity to get in this game if they took care of business, and they have, and they'd certainly have a really good opportunity to win the game. I still think Ohio State's unbeatable. Instead of going to the ACC title game, Jace, I think the most interesting part of the ACC title game is what it does to the college football playoff. So this college football playoff poll came out yesterday at the time of our recording, 2 days ago at the time of the show being released. Man, okay, so I'm just going to read it off. Obviously, you guys have read it. You guys have seen it if you are watching or listening to the show, so we don't need to actually read it off. I say Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss. That's fine in the top 6. The questions here is regarding a number 10 Notre Dame, number 10 Notre Dame, a number 13 Texas, and an unranked Duke. That's where all of this lies. This is one of the first playoff polls that's come out that 20 to 25 is interesting. Tulane's at 20. 24 is North Texas. James Madison's at 25. Duke's unrated. Unranked. Basically, what the committee's telling us right now is that even if Duke were to win the ACC title game against Virginia, we're going to have 2 group of 5 teams in the college football playoff because it's the highest ranked it's 5 highest ranked conference champs. It's not the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. Let's start with Texas. Do you think Texas has a real case? Steve Sarkisian's been politicking, as college football coaches have done for decades now, of getting them in the playoff. Sark's had good points. They're the only team in the country that's beaten teams like several top 10 teams. They've also lost to two top 4 teams and an unranked Florida. They've beaten number 7 A&M. They've beaten number 8 Oklahoma. They've beaten number 14 Vanderbilt. They lost to number 1 Ohio State, lost to number 3 Georgia, and unranked Florida. I see a case. I don't see a pretty case. I think they might be Texas toast. But do they have a case for you?
That's fantastic. I'm going to say no. I 3 losses, and you lost to 4-8 Florida by 8 points in a game where you kind of got handled. And then I think you had a good audition game against Georgia where you got manhandled. I mean, that game was over within the second drive of the game. Like, yeah, this Georgia's just so much better. And that Florida loss inexcusable, right? Like you just can't lose that game if you want to call yourself a playoff team with 3 losses. And then the Georgia game, like I said, had they competed and played a tight game against Georgia, I would have felt a little bit more sympathy to them about this case that they're trying to build of backing into the playoff with 3 losses. But Georgia's a playoff team, and I think we all have agreed on that. And you didn't even look remotely the part in that game. And yes, you get the bounce back big win against Texas A&M. You can go Texas A&M, other than Notre Dame, hasn't really played anybody this year. They were kind of riding a big high. They had looked shaky the week before, or was it a week or 2 before, against South Carolina. That win's impressive, absolutely. And it's also really ironic when they point to all their like top 10 wins, but some of them are retrospectively because they're not top 10 anymore. So if you're going to count their top 10 wins, you got to count everybody's top 10 wins whenever it happened, in which case it's not nearly as impressive as a stat. And I would also feel more sympathy, but I can't stand the mentality of, well, then we don't schedule Ohio State, don't schedule tough non-conference games, you're fine. Look, even if you don't schedule that game and you beat up on some poor opponent, you still live in a world where you're a 2-loss team with a bad loss to Florida and a getting manhandled by Georgia, right? You even look at their non-con, they looked ugly against a really bad UTEP team. A UTEP team that is 2-10, you only won by 17. And if you go to the UTEP schedule, that's actually one of the closest games UTEP played all year. There was a lot of opportunities for Texas to win football games and make a statement for them to get in the playoff. And they were just too inconsistent. They have a really high ceiling. They showed that against Texas A&M. And I get the frustration. I've watched football teams where I felt like my team had a really high ceiling, but we played to our floor more often than we should have. And we're on the outside looking in. But that's college football. That's what the sport's been forever. That's what makes this sport so beautiful. It's what makes it fun. It's what makes comeback seasons so avengeful and feel so good. I know we have a ceiling. This didn't show it. And if anything, that Ohio State loss is helping you more than it's hurting you. Because like if you schedule bad non-conferences and you face a bad loss, you're done. And that's the big thing. But if you schedule Ohio State and you beat them, then guess who flies up the rankings? And it just kills me because this sport is built on winning big games. That is why that's all of us watch college football, because it's so fun to watch big games and it feels so damn good to win a big game. It's why you schedule them. It's why you play them. If you're not going to schedule them, you're not going to play them, then what's the point? So I'm so sick of the Ohio State non-con stuff. Don't lose to 4-8 Florida and you're fine.
So, one, that might have been your greatest take in this show's history. That was an unbelievable rant. Number two, I agree with you. I think Texas, I said it on the recap show, it's too little too late. Like, there's clear criteria you have to reach again to be a playoff team, and they lost to 4-8 Florida. But you bring up a really good point. I'm going to read a couple of Sark quotes from this week, but you bring up a really good point about scheduling. If Texas scheduled, I'll use a Dan Lanning quote, Chattanooga State week 1, they'd be a 2-loss team who would probably be in the top 10. The College Football Playoff Committee, though, has told us we will celebrate and we will reward and we will encourage you to have good schedules. We will encourage you to go schedule good teams because we will reward you based off of your strength of schedule, not just strength of record, strength of schedule. I agree with you, having Ohio State on that schedule is important, but theoretically, I understand they lost to Florida. But theoretically, if they didn't have Ohio State on that schedule, they would be a playoff team, no doubt. And they're being punished now for signing up to go play the best team in the country or one of the best teams in the country on the road in Columbus. Like, if you're Ohio State right now, I think they play again next year. If you're Texas right now, why aren't you calling your AD and saying cancel that game? Because the committee's not rewarding you. So that's the other side of it. This is what Sark said, and I'll give you a chance to respond. This is what Sark said this week on the Herd with Colin Cowherd. He goes, at the end of the day, in this conference, it's not about getting up for 2 games a year. It's week in, week out. And the grind of this conference and to go play your SEC opener in the Swamp against Florida is not an easy task in that environment against that team with the amount of talent that they have. We won some really big games. We played 5 top 10 teams in the country out of our 5 regular season games. 3 of those were wins, 2 of those which are ranked in the top 10, and the other Vanderbilt is just ranked outside. Their wins are, again, they have very good wins, and their losses, if you could have good losses, they've lost to 2 top 3 teams in the country. They have a really good case. I just wonder, I understand and I agree with you that they shouldn't be in. Like, it's too little too late. I wonder, though, if the committee leaves them out, are we all of a sudden going to see teams do what Indiana did in this offseason? Cut out their Power 4 non-con schedules and replace them with easy bye games, just so they can just have the record again instead of giving us good games like you asked for.
I think some teams will, but some coaches just aren't. Like, I don't want to call these coaches soft, because that's not what I'm trying to portray, but some of these coaches, like, they're just competitors. Like, Dan Lanning has talked about it a lot. He's never been on the fan of let's schedule soft and go from there. He's always, I want to play everybody. I want to play these guys. I want to play anybody who give me a chance. There's a lot of coaches who, like Ryan Day is another coach who wants to play those big games. There's a lot of coaches who are competitors and they want to come out and they want to beat the best to be the best. And it's a saying for a reason. And I think what's going to happen is teams are going to start, because there will be teams. Texas will for sure be one of them. Well, they're going to cancel all these big games. A couple things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to take a small revenue hit from it. But more importantly, when the end of the season comes and there's 2 loss, let's say you get 2 loss Indiana and you have 2 loss Texas next year. Indiana has a loss to Ohio State. Texas has a loss to Alabama. Okay, really good losses. And then let's say Indiana loses a weird game against a mid-tier Michigan State team and Texas loses to a mid-tier Florida team next year. They're going to look and say, well, at least Indiana beat number 20 Duke to start the year. And Texas, sure, you beat up on UTEP this year, but it's not going to mean anything. And then Texas is going to be all angry and they're going to be all pissed because, oh, well, Duke's a quality win now. They're not in the SEC. It's like, at what point do we stop crying about being on the outside? And do we realize, like, I have 12 games to prove myself? College football has never been the NFL, right? We don't have these like perfect schedules every single year where everything's even and fair and we get 12 teams. That's not college football. And if that's what you want, then college football is probably not the sport for you. We went from 2 teams on a computer because it couldn't judge eye test. It couldn't tell the story of a season. It couldn't tell if you lost by in a close game or you got destroyed. It just knew it was a loss. We said that was dumb. Let's go to 4 teams because 4 teams is probably a little bit more fair. And then 5 and 6 get left out because they had a couple losses. And we say, oh, well, you know what? Like, we need to expand it more because this isn't fair. And we go to 12 teams now. Now, like, we're talking about a 9-3 team who had 2 really good opportunities to get a big win, and they lost them both. And like I said, they got manhandled by Georgia. It wasn't like a close loss. That's an audition. You had a great chance in front of you to avenge that bad Florida loss and prove yourselves to be a playoff worthy team, and you got crushed. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the truth of the matter. And I can't just, you have 3 losses in a 12 game season. One of them is piss poor against a really bad team, and the other one you got manhandled by a really good team. Yes, you have a high ceiling. You very clearly have a low floor, and you're just not a top 12 team in the country consistently. You can be on your high days, but we've also seen you be a bottom half team on your low, and that's just the reality of college.
I think I agree with you with everything you said about Texas. That is all above, like, that all is not only pretty much the way most college football fans feel and think. I want the college football playoff to be the most deserving and the best teams in the country. I don't want it to be a game of politicking. So there's a reason that everyone who was in favor of the Big Ten's AQI model, getting teams in based off of automatic qualifiers instead of a committee, they're all piping up right now because they're saying, well, if you agree to this wouldn't even be an argument. There wouldn't be a fight about this. But now we're talking about it. Another fight, though, that we have to talk about. Notre Dame's sitting at 10. Miami's sitting at 12. I think it is more likely if one of them was in the playoffs for Miami to be in there than Notre Dame. I think on paper, currently playing on the football team, on the football field, in Vegas, spread-wise, whatever you want to take to compare the teams, I would take Notre Dame. Today, right now, I think Notre Dame's a better football team on paper. They're the better football team if they squared up again. I think if they played again, I would take Notre Dame to win and cover and not lose an ounce of sleep. With that said, I think the committee kind of shot themselves in the foot, putting in that first playoff poll, putting Miami at like 18 and Notre Dame at 10 or whatever they had them at.
Mm-hmm.
Because they always talk about this whole thing of we compare teams within similar brackets. Or similar pools. So when they're talking about those similar pools, Miami, Notre Dame, they had the argument of they weren't in the same pool. But like slowly but surely, they were like, okay, we got to start moving them closer to the same pool. I think putting them at 10 and Miami at 12 is basically giving the committee a chance to say, oh, they're in the same pool now. Now let's look at the head-to-head. They both have similar performances against non-cons. I know, not non-cons, against similar opponents. I know Notre Dame just beat the snot out of Pitt. Miami did too, but no one paid attention. Notre Dame beat the snot out of Stanford. Notre Dame destroyed Syracuse, up 21-0 before CJ Carr took a snap. In a bad year of the ACC, they both have all right resumes. Notre Dame looks like the better team. Miami's lost to 2 mid to bad ACC teams. Notre Dame has 2 quote-unquote good losses. And they've rolled since. Where do you think this is going to lie? Is Miami a playoff team? Is Notre Dame a playoff team? Is there any chance both get in?
I'm going to talk purely out of the way it's set up by the committee right now. This is what we think should happen or if we were in charge, what we would do. This is purely based off of what the committee has put in front of us. Miami being at 12 and Notre Dame being at 10 should tell me that I think there's no shot Miami jumps Notre Dame. Because I don't see how you can say at the end of the season Notre Dame is 2 spots better than should. based on what the committee said. My reason being, they put Notre Dame at 10, and Notre Dame's regular season's over. Miami's regular season's over, and they're at 12. So they're telling me that the season ended. They think Notre Dame is 2 spots better than Miami. It would be ridiculous to me if next week they just say, randomly on a bye week where neither team played, all of a sudden Miami got spots above Notre Dame. That's what they've done. And mind you, Notre Dame has been above Miami ever since. Say it again.
With neither team playing, the committee chair on Tuesday when he was when he was talking to Reese Davis, he was asked, "Will idle teams move around?" And he said, "Probably." Like he said, yes, there's a chance idle teams will move around. Not because they did anything to win, not because they did anything to lose. So in that essence, neither team did anything to rise or drop. But we've seen this happen with Florida State in a 4-team playoff. But they went undefeated. They didn't do anything to fall out except their quarterback got hurt. On the final poll, Florida State was jumped because the committee couldn't have a bad playoff.
Yeah. That's the one thing I fear. And if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm afraid. And it's what's best for the money. And that could be bringing in an SEC team over them or something like that. But I'll say this, with Notre Dame being above Miami still, and every week since the first playoff poll, which, by the way, I'm shouting us out. We called that, how that was problematic, how they made that gap so big, because we said if Miami closes that gap, they're going to have to either really skyrocket them or something like that. Anyways, Notre Dame at 10, you need, okay, first of all, Georgia has to win, and it has to win by a lot, I think, because I think you're going to need Bama to get backed out. And then I think obviously for sure they're going to need Texas Tech to win. Ohio State, Indiana doesn't matter, and I don't really think the American it doesn't really matter between American and ACC. They're going to have to figure out a team between the American, the ACC, and the James Madison Conference, which I'm drawing a blank. The Sun Belt? Sun Belt, I believe. That's Notre Dame's path in, unfortunately, is it's going to be Texas Tech win, Georgia dominates Alabama, and then it's just whatever happens from there. But if BYU wins, if Alabama pulls off a big upset, then I think you start worrying about, all right, there's one spot left. Are they going to keep us over Miami, right? Or did this Texas parading and the SEC love and parading as well, did they do enough to jump me? So you're going to get a little nervous. You want as much cushion as possible. I personally think they're going to make it. I think they're going to be in the college football playoff. I think Texas holds strong. I think Alabama was in over them. I think Alabama could lose by 100, and the committee is still going to put them in. I think Notre Dame will make the college football playoff, and I think that they are the scariest 10 seed we might ever have, is what's going to happen.
Wasn't Ohio State like a 9 seed? Or last year? What were they last year?
They were an 8. They were an 8 seed because they were trying to call Neyland North the shoe.
Yeah. So I guess my I think Notre Dame is in. The question of if BYU, like Notre Dame fans, I would suggest you to be the biggest Texas Tech fans in the world. Knock BYU to another stratosphere, because what you're rooting for is for you and Miami to both be in. Or at least for you and Miami on Selection Sunday, it's literally you guys fighting against each other. Because right now, even though the committee put Miami at 12, they're not in the playoff. They're in the group of 5 champs going to be number 12. Miami right now is on the outside looking in. They're in that bubble. BYU's at 11. That means they are in the playoff, but with a loss, the committee's telling you right there they're not. But if they beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game, they're not dropping Texas Tech out. BYU's firmly in the playoff. Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Georgia, Ohio State, Indiana, they're going to be in the playoff. You're soon going to be running low on spots. And I'm going to warn Notre Dame fans, not because I don't think you are a better team, but if push comes to shove and Notre Dame and Miami are the next 2 teams they are comparing for that 11 spot, that 10 spot, that's where I think the committee can be like, well, we've been considering head-to-head all year long, and we're going to put Miami in. that's that's where you're concerned. If BYU wins, they're firmly in, and they got one spot. It's going to be Miami versus Notre Dame, and that's where the head-to-head might come in for the committee.
Yeah. And the unfortunate part, and I think this is something a lot of people have been a little scared to say, is in my opinion, and Farbod, I believe based on our conversations, you might agree, but correct me if I'm wrong. We both believe Miami and Notre Dame should be more inside of the playoff than Oklahoma and Alabama. Because if Notre Dame is put above Miami and they like it because of eye test, then I'm comfortable saying eye test, if that's what we're talking about here, I think I like Notre Dame more than I like Oklahoma and more than I like Alabama. I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. I think Notre Dame's a top 5 team in the country.
Yeah.
I think they unfortunately had to play 2 wagons to start the year. And it was unfortunate. It was the opposite scenario where Notre Dame was playing a fresh QB. He was just getting his feet wet. And you have, senior quarterback on this team, junior quarterback on this team. Like, unfortunately, it was inexperienced quarterback versus 2 really good teams who had experienced quarterbacks. And both of those games were breaking losses. The Texas A&M game, it was like a fourth and goal from the 20 PI call that basically gave, or I can't remember the exact flag, but basically a last second flag that gave Texas A&M that win. The Miami game, it was just like if they had one more minute, they can get this thing done. They lose 2 heartbreaking games early, and they have been so dominant. And it would be a shame if they missed the playoff for how good they are. And a good measure of how good a football team is. Take a step back. Think about your favorite team. Who would you rather face? Who gives you more confidence you can beat them? Notre Dame is one of the very few teams that I don't have a lot of confidence in my team beating. Alabama and Oklahoma, I'm fairly confident against those 2 teams. Notre Dame, I'm not. So it would be a shame if they missed out. It really would. But unfortunately, it's lining up to be a very likely scenario.
I just think I don't disagree with you on any of that. I'll say this. I think if you're talking about quality of team, I'll put Notre Dame over Oklahoma and Alabama. But I would also say their quote unquote their losses came earlier in the season, so it's easier to put makeup on the season and look really good towards the end. Whereas Alabama or Oklahoma's losses have come somewhere in the middle. So they're a little bit more fresh in our minds. Obviously the Florida State game happened. I know that's early.
I would say Alabama's is by far the worst loss of any of these top 10 teams. And people are so willing to say, oh, Alabama, but that was a different team back then. Look at where they are now. Okay, then why can't I say that about Notre Dame? Why can't I say Notre Dame was a different team? It just, it's like, it's just, it doesn't go both ways, and it's frustrating.
Beginning of the year and through week 7, you and I were in lockstep of Miami might be the most dangerous team in the country. They are scary on the defensive line. They're scary on the offensive line. And they've taken a step back. Carson Beck hasn't played as well, and that's why they lost to SMU. That's why they lost to Louisville. Those losses happened. I would probably, I don't know who I would favor if in a hypothetical game Alabama versus Miami, but I would probably trust Alabama more. I don't know what Carson Beck or Miami I'm going to get, but if you told me I got really good Carson Beck, yeah, that's going to be a damn good game. If you put Oklahoma up against Miami, look, I trust that Oklahoma defense to do really good things. Do I trust the Oklahoma offense to be consistent? I don't know. My last point on Notre Dame Miami is I'm not saying that Miami's a better football team, and you know that. I just think in the event that it comes down to it on Selection Sunday between Miami and Notre Dame, the committee's going to pretend like they've been taking their criteria into account all season long, and they're going to throw Miami ahead of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head win. And I've seen people argue for it on either side. I'm okay with what we got. I'm excited for Selection Sunday in general. You want to get some cleanup crew done?
Let's get some cleanup crew in here. It's going to be a very exciting weekend to see what unfolds. Notre Dame fans, hang on. A lot of anti-BYU fans this week. I want to wrap up there, unfortunately, for the BYU faithful. But not a lot of teams are going to be rooting them on. What are they, 12.5-point dogs? All right. enough poll time talk, because at the end of the day, none of us have that crystal ball, and it comes down to what those handful of members in that room decide is right. All right, Farbod, I have the first cleanup crew topic that I want to ask you. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. What in the hell is going on in Happy Valley?
Jace, I don't want to take I don't want to take like a celebratory lap yet. Because I also wasn't rooting for Penn State to fall into this trap or whatever they've fallen into. When they fired James Franklin, I told you it was the right fire. You could argue it was the right time to do it, but you better have a plan because you just fired a coach that consistently won 10 to 9 to 11 games. He recruited really well, and at least you were in a spot to return next year with another competitive roster to win again, to try another shot at winning. Now, I saw on the Penn State message boards today what would have been more toxic. And for those at home, today is not early National Signing Day. Penn State ended up like 138th in recruiting in the country. I think they had 2 commits. By the way, there's 138 or something FBS teams. Wherever they are, they're last. I say that to say that on the Penn State message board, I read a question pitched to other Penn State fans. Would it have been more toxic to keep James through this week or what they're going through right now? Pat Kraft has whiffed. It's not even the fact that like Pat Kraft and the Penn State AD has like kept the hiring cycle or his hiring plan secret, and he has a secret thing up his sleeve. We know for a fact, based on reporting, he has whiffed on several head coaches. They fired James Franklin with Curt Cignetti in mind. Cignetti quickly signed an extension with Indiana. Then they say they didn't, but they talked to Matt Rule. Matt Rule quickly signed an extension with Nebraska. Talked to Brent Key. He's about to sign an extension. They've talked to Jeff Brum. He's about to sign an extension. They've talked to Mike Elko. He signed an extension. And this week they thought they had Kalani Sitake. And they got beat out by the CEO of Crumble Cookies because that guy wanted to put in more effort and money into keeping Kalani Sitake at BYU rather than what Pat Kraft is clearly doing wrong at Penn State. I don't know what the right thing is there right now. I don't Josh Pace said it best. Penn State's not Ohio State in that conference. Penn State's not a good job, like as good a job as Oregon in that conference. But Penn State's Penn State. You would assume a lot of good candidates would want that job, would want to coach in Beaver Stadium, would want to have that rabid fan base. And it seems like every time, like at this point, we've gotten past the possibility of coaches are turning down Penn State because they would rather be where they are. We've gotten to the point where like, all right, enough's enough. Pat Kraft is whiffing on every single person. It's not because of the money he's missing. So
Perfect.
I don't know exactly what Penn State's doing. There is talk, at least I heard today, about how maybe they got something up their sleeve. Maybe they're talking to someone who's coaching this weekend. And it's not going to be, it could be Tony Elliott at Virginia. It could be Manny Diaz at Duke. It's not going to be Kirby Smart. It's not going to be Joey McGuire. He just signed an extension. We know it's not Kalani Sitake now. He just signed an extension because Penn State whiffed on him. The conversation is it Kalen DeBoer? Now, if they go out and sign Kalen DeBoer, I guess my opinion on this whole situation might slightly improve. But the fact that Pat Kraft has whiffed on so many guys at this point and allowed his team to get to early National Signing Day, they've lost, 20 commits, most of which who James Franklin has actually flipped to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is a top 25 recruiting class. And Penn State has 1 or 2 commits. I don't know what's wrong other than the fact that Pat Kraft is botching this and probably asking for his own fire.
The Cignetti strikeout, okay, that's understandable. Tough, but understandable. Even like Sitake, okay, tough, but understandable. Sounds like BYU donors coughed up a lot. But once you start striking out on Ryan Silverfield, apparently they turned down Will Stein, as you had mentioned to me, because he wasn't, what was it, professional or polished enough?
Polished.
They couldn't get Alex Golish. Like they're like, we love Alex Golish. We think Ryan Silverfield's a great coach. They couldn't get John Summerall. No discounts to any of those guys I just mentioned. All of them took jobs that are lower tiered jobs than Penn State. I don't know if it was Penn State running them out the room, if they weren't the ones to close the deal. I have no idea what's going on there. It'll be very interesting to hear about what happens and to hear what they do. And with them mentioning, with people talking about maybe they have something up their sleeve, and how you said Kalen DeBoer's the only. I'm looking at all of the games. I even opened it up to like small schools. He's really the only coach that could maybe get pulled. If you're Penn State, maybe you're praying Alabama has a piss poor showing in that game and the fans turn on him, in which case it's like, okay, maybe he'll come here. But if he wins that game, yeah, if he wins that game, what do you do? I don't know where you go from here. Also, if you remember when this all happened, and you know, the point I had made was do it early because it gives you time to figure out your plan, interview the right people. I have no idea what Penn State has been doing the last 2-3 months, however long it's been since then. 2 months? I have no idea. I mean, how there has been like 15 to 20 coaching hires, which we'll actually kind of start talking about them here in a minute, that have all gone through to programs that are smaller than Penn State for much less money than what we think Penn State has to offer. Maybe there's something going on with the administration. I think there has to be something deeper than what we would ever know and see on the outside. Because now they're talking about getting Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
He's the name I'm seeing pop around here.
Mike Tomlin or Dable. Like the argument right now is, well, Jimmy Sexton was pissed that they fired James Franklin, so he's like sabotaging the hiring cycle processes of Penn State. No, I think if I was Jimmy Sexton, I'd be just saying, well, I don't like what you did to one of my clients, but here's another client. Let's keep it good. That's how he puts money in his pocket. If you ask what they did in the last 52 days, as of recording, this is the 52nd day of the Penn State coaching search. UCLA has been filled, first of all, before Penn State has. USF was open for like 3 days. They just got filled. Like, the job that's open is Tulane because they just opened up. Like what they've done in that time is strike out on Kurt Signetti, strike out on Mike Elko, strike out on Eli Drinkowitz, strike out on Matt Rule, strike out on Marcus Freeman, strike out on Kalen DeBoer, maybe, not yet, but maybe, strike out on Kalani Sitake. They've struck out on Ryan Silverfield. They struck out on Bob Chesney, who took the UCLA job. They clearly struck out or didn't attempt to hire Will Stein. They struck out on Brian Hartline. At some point, there's something going on there that's not what Penn State offers. It's the people running the search.
And I think with all the commits leaving, that's also a huge sign because, yes, it was a head coach, but, I mean, if you look at these other schools, Oregon just lost both coordinators, like the week of National Signing Day. Guess how many of their players have decommitted or flipped? None. 0. That's a sign of a program that's healthy. Go to Penn State. They lose their head coach. They retain a lot of coaches still. They lose all but 2 commits. There has to be something deeper that's going on. I'm very excited to find out what it is. I don't know if Pat Kraft expected every coach to come pouring into his office begging for the job. I don't know if he was a jerk to these people in these interviews. I mean, seriously, Brian Hartline took the USF job within 3 days. I have to imagine Penn State within the last 53 days had more contact with him than USF did in the last 3 days. It wasn't enough. Bob Chesney, the JMU coach, takes the UCLA job. I can promise you the Penn State job should be more attractive. But again, from what we know as fans and as people that talk about the sport, we only know so much. We don't know what goes on in the rooms. We don't know what the relationship is like with the AD, with the school. So there's something deep going on there. And it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But to wrap it up, and to get off the doomsday Penn State train for a second.
Who do you think they're going to hire?
There's me, remember? I'm going to, I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. I think they're going to find like some ex-NFL player or NFL coach that is like, had been fired from a head coaching job, something like that a couple years ago, who's now a D coordinator, like a Matt Patricia type thing is what I think they'll do. But to give them some sort of resolve, if you're a Penn State fan, to give you some credit something to hang your hat on, some hope. The one benefit you're going to have is when the transfer portal opens up, ideally you have a coach by then or multiple, like, new staff. You will quickly become arguably the most attractive transfer destination because you're going to have, because of the lack of recruiting, you're going to have a deep bag to spend. You're going to be ready to go and spend a lot of money. And ideally, you have a good coach figured out by then. And there's going to be 2 portal windows. That'll give you time to bring in that coach's guys, ideally. And then you can go out and spend big because you're going to have more money than everybody else. That's the silver lining. That's the hope. That's probably what you need to dream of. But however, in this moment, it does not feel like that.
I think at this point they might be hiring Terry Smith, who's their interim coach. Pat Kraft has made it very clear he does not want to hire Terry Smith, but some of his players and all those people have basically been asking him to hire Terry Smith. You know how I feel about hiring interim coaches, but the problem is in this scenario they have canvassed the entire country and they probably had better options, but all of those options have said no. Couple of those options, let's just quickly talk about them. Any of these that stand out to you, just stop me. Brian Hartline takes the USF head coaching job. He's the OC at Ohio State, wide receiver coach. Will Stein, OC at Oregon, takes Kentucky. Josh Lupoy, DC at Oregon, takes Cal. Pat Fitzgerald replacing Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Bob Chesney says no to Penn State. He's going to be the UCLA head coach. John Summerall of Tulane is taking the Florida head coach. Lane Kiffin, obviously, we know LSU. Pete Golding went from defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, quickly promoted to the head coach of Ole Miss. Ryan Silverfield goes from Memphis to Arkansas, becoming their head coach. Alex Golesh takes the Auburn head coaching job, and Eric Morris takes the Oklahoma State head coaching job. This is all on top of the James Franklin taking Virginia Tech.
I want to give you 2 of these hires that I really love. That I think, and I'm not the James Franklin Virginia Tech, not the obvious great hires, but 2 that aren't getting a lot of conversation that I'm a big fan of here. I'm gonna give you one on the flip side. Hire number 1 that I'm a big fan of is Alex Golesh to Auburn. I think Auburn is at their best when they play hard-nosed football behind a really good quarterback. Think Cam Newton days. They always had a stout D-line. They always had a stout O-line and a really good quarterback and enough weapons and enough of a defense to keep things moving. I think the state of Alabama produces a lot of talent at the trenches positions, plural, all of them. Alex Golesh is a guy who can recruit those. Look at South Florida this past year. They were built kind of like those good Auburn teams. They had Byron Brown at quarterback, and they had really good offensive line, a really good defensive line, and enough around it to produce a really good football team. I think that's a guy that can win in the SEC. They beat Florida this year. I believe who was the other big win they had this year? I'm blanking on them. South Florida's a team that's proven he can recruit in the South. He can win in the South. Not Miami. They did lose that one.
Yeah.
Anyways, I really like the Alex Golesh to Auburn hire. I think that was a fast track to being back on track for Auburn. And in the grand scheme of these American coaches going elsewhere, that's one that I really like. And then the second one I'll highlight is Pat Fitzgerald to Michigan State. This isn't the sexy hire. I don't think this is they're going to be 10-2 next year hire. I don't know if they'll ever be in the Big Ten championship game within the next 4 years kind of hire. But if you go back to Michigan State from when we were children till 2015-ish, that was a really good football program. It was a program winning Rose Bowls, winning Big Ten championships, producing a lot of NFL talent. And they did it through playing like very tough football. They always had stout defenses. They were the originators of the no-fly zone. That's how they played football. And Pat Fitzgerald is determined to bring that mentality back to Michigan State. Michigan State's their best when they play sports with a chip on their shoulder. Pat Fitzgerald is a coach who definitely has a chip on his shoulder right now, given how things ended at Northwestern, how things went after that, and where he's at now. I think that's a really good match of a guy whose life and mentality perfectly fits what the school needs and the football team needs. I like that, to him to get them back on track.
So can I just argue one thing? I think Pat Fitzgerald's a good coach. I think he can build a winner with the right resources. And it sounds like Michigan State committed a ton more resources than they were giving to Jonathan Smith. But you know how I feel about
unfortunately.
Jonathan Smith was kind of just like, hey, you're coming here. We'll pay you $33 million to fire you. It's going to suck for you, but like at least here's this giant bag. You know how I feel about the Jonathan Smith firing, but I also, like I said in the recap show, it's not my program. I'm not a Michigan State fan. I don't know how hurt Michigan State fans were by Jonathan Smith's tenure there. I just think he wasn't given an adequate enough shot. With that said, I think two things can be true. I think Pat Fitzgerald can be a really good head coach somewhere, and I think Michigan State might have been better off going, if they want to get rid of Jonathan Smith, going for something what Kentucky did. Like, we don't know if Will Stein's going to work out there, but go get the potential next Dan Lanning. Go get the next innovator, and not someone that you know, like not a Bob Stoops, not someone that you know exactly what their coaching style is like, what their recruiting is like. For me, also, one thing I don't love about the hire, it feels like a program looking to gain, what's it called? It feels like a program looking for nostalgia instead of the future, looking at the rearview mirror instead of the windshield. It feels like if Oregon went to hire Justin Wilcox or Chip Kelly in 2021 instead of looking at Dan Lanning. Like, we don't know. We didn't know at that point if Dan Lanning was going to work out, but at least it was a risk they were willing. It was a calculated risk instead of, we know what Justin Wilcox is. We know what Chip Kelly would be. Let's try to take a risk. I don't think Pat Fitzgerald is like that bad. I just thought, like, if you're gonna fire Jonathan Smith in the middle of a rebuild, I expected a little bit more of a boom kind of coach, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think Pat Fitzgerald's a guy to take you to those levels or those heights. And I do think they're looking for the nostalgia rear view mirror mentality. But I think that's what they need. Michigan State under Mark D'Antonio was never a guy to sign a top 70 class. Like, if you went through their recruits, he was finding the Le'Veon Bells, the 2 stars that were committed to Middle Tennessee State that he brings in and turns them into All-American corners. Like, that is Michigan State football throughout their history. It has always been their best when they play hard-nosed, tough football, chip on their shoulder. They've never been a recruiting powerhouse for football. And I think rightfully so. They know that we've been a dud program for the last 10 years, and there's no coach, there's no Will Stein who's going to come in here and then all of a sudden he's going to out recruit Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan and get any kid who's going to go there say, no, I'm going to East Lansing. I think they know that we're not going to go from the program we've been the last 10 years to being this juggernaut with this sexy coach. I think it takes time, and I think they need to build a reputation. I think they need to build an identity. They need to build some success before they start thinking about what does this look like. And knowing, like, Michigan State fans personally, it's a program that they don't need national championships to be satisfied, thrilled, fill a stadium, spend a lot of money. They just want to see a 9-3, 10-2 team that beats Michigan every couple of years, Ohio State every couple of years, goes to a Rose Bowl here and there. I guess now it's a little bit different. That's what they want to see to make money. And I think the AD knows that. I think the school knows that. And it's not the big jump or the risk, but I think it's the right step. And I think that's important for a program that's been dead for 10 years.
Now, with all that said, and I know we're running late, so I'll try to keep this short. I walked down some of the hires. Obviously, Franklin, Hartline, Stein, Tosh, Pat Fitzgerald, Bob Chesney, Sumrall, Lane, Pete Golding, Silverfield, Golish, and Morris. There's more hires out there. I think if anyone is going to tell you right now, oh, this guy's guaranteed to succeed or this guy's guaranteed to fail, I encourage you to listen to this famous list from Bleacher Report, I think, in 2021. They ranked the top hires in 2021. Number 1, Lincoln Riley to USC. Number 2, Mario Cristobal to Miami. Number 3, Brian Kelly to LSU. 4, Billy Napier to Florida. 5, Marcus Freeman to Notre Dame. 6, Brent Venables to Oklahoma. 7, Dan Lanning to Oregon. 8, Sonny Dykes to TCU. 9, Kalen DeBoer to Washington. 10, Tony Elliott to Virginia. And 11 was Joey McGuire. 12, Brent Pry. 13, Washington State hiring Jake Dickert. 14, Mike Elko getting hired by Duke. And I say all that to say, we have zero idea how any of these coaches are going to pan out. I could take a guess. Ryan Silverfield, I think he's a good coach. I don't know if it's going to work at Arkansas. Bob Chesney, I don't know if it's going to work at UCLA. I think that says a lot more about the place than the coach, though. Pete Golding, I think he's an excellent defensive coordinator. I have no idea if he's going to be good as a defensive coordinator. I mean, as a head coach. Will Stein, I think the world of him. I think he's going to elevate Kentucky. They're going to play in the SEC. He did really well at Oregon with a talent advantage. What's going to happen at Kentucky when more often than not he's going to be playing with a talent disadvantage until he really ups the recruiting there? Like, how many of these guys are going to be, or are we going to be looking back in 3 years and be like, man, Alex Golish to Auburn was a disaster? Or are we going to be like, damn, that's what they needed?
About that list, I think that's more indicative of the poor journalism of Bleacher Report than it is of like our, because like I remember when that cycle happened, I was really high on Dan Lanning at the time. I thought it was a phenomenal hire. I was also very high on Marcus Freeman, and I was very high on Kalen DeBoer out of Fresno State. And those would have been 3 of my top 5. And I mean, I could go find the text to prove me saying this.
Yeah.
Bleacher Report had all those low, and they all turned out to be really good hires. And I clowned Brian Kelly and said it was a terrible hire. Look what happened. I clowned Lincoln Riley. It's not been horrible, but it's been kind of what we expected. And Mario Crispal's been exactly what we expected. So I trust us a little bit more than I trust like a Bleacher Report article. But you're right, especially the Ryan Silverfields, Bob Chesney's, Alex Golish's, Eric Morris's. You're spot on with them. Sometimes those are the coaches that are so hit or miss. You know, it really sometimes it's hard to determine with those coaches, especially like an Eric Morris, who very quickly turned around North Texas. Did he just get a really good roster in a weak conference, or is he a really good program builder? And sometimes when those coaches get hired really quickly, yes, they can turn out Kurt Signetti, but sometimes they can turn out to kind of be a dud. And that list of names you just gave proves that a little bit. One name I'm curious what you think. Pete Golding, the defense coordinator, being promoted to head coach at Ole Miss. Players seem to love him. The Ole Miss defense is...
Players seem to love Terry Smith at Penn State. Players seem to love Antonio Pierce when he was the Raiders interim because Josh McDaniels was the head coach. Players love the interim head coach. And when they become the head coach, we'll see how they do. Pete Golding, I don't want to sound like I keep harping on the guy. He's at Ole Miss because Nick Saban liked him, but he wanted to fire him. So he talked to his buddy Lane and asked him to hire him. He's not at Ole Miss because he was the best option for the job. Now, he's grown at Ole Miss. He's had good defenses. He's sent guys to the draft. I give you all of that. But his origination at Ole Miss was because Nick Saban didn't want to embarrass the guy by firing him as Alabama's defensive coordinator. I'm not a fan ever of hiring interim coaches. I also don't get the entire point of Ole Miss promoting the one guy the guy that runs the worst unit on the team, right? Like Charlie Weiss Jr. was the offensive coordinator. I know Lane called plays, but at least that guy technically was the offensive coordinator of the really good offense. Did you have conversation with him? You're right. The players like Pete Golding. I think Pete Golding could be a really good head coach. I have no idea. With that said, I think this was a move that their AD probably had to make to keep the players invested for the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss is hiring again in 2 years.
Yeah, it felt like a Band-Aid on a surgery, like a surgery. I was a terrible analogy. It felt like short-term fix. Let me just keep the focus for this season. And players like him, and plus I think when they made the big stance of like Lane, it's either us now and forever or never. I think when they like kind of made that like program first stance, once you do that, you kind of have to stay within the program, right? Like I think you got to keep that momentum moving, and rightfully so. It's the biggest season in school history, and you have a chance at a national championship. I don't hate it for this season, but I'm with you. In 2 years from now, I have a strong feeling that Ole Miss job will be open. I just don't know if he's the X's and O's guy to win in the SEC, like you said with Nick Saban's story on him. Their defense was shaky this year. It's a fun story, but is it going to work out in the SEC? That'll be the big question.
Look, I say all that to say, to become a good head coach in America right now in college football, you relate to players and you hire a really good staff and you let all of the chips fall from there. If you relate to players, they're going to run through a brick wall for you. And it's clear that Ole Miss's players love Pete Golding, like you said. If he hires a good staff, brings in good recruiting personnel, he'll have a shot. I'm not saying it's like dead on arrival, but my entire argument about interim coaches, and I'm going to bore you with the amount of time I'm going to tell you this, is if you make a national search and he ends up being your best option, wonderful. You did your research. But if you just said, oh, our guy left, who else is in the building? Oh, this guy. And you don't go look at all your options, and you might be stuck in trouble. One last point I'll make on this hiring cycle is I hope Tosh Lupoi and Will Stein, Brian Hartline, all those guys pan out. I know Pat Fitzgerald is going to be at Michigan State for like 5-10 years because Michigan State probably can't afford another firing within the. They just paid Jonathan Smith $33 million for 2 years of work.
They oddly enough have like some of the richest. I think they have like 3 or 4 owners of professional sports teams. So yeah,
they do, but they're probably not going to want to be paying all these buyouts to keep firing coaches. Eventually, it's going to go back to the AD. That's all the coaches have been hired. If you have any other ones that you want our thoughts on, hit us up on Twitter, obviously, or anywhere. Let's quickly go through our picks for the conference championships. We already know our Big Ten and SEC championship picks. Let's go to the American, number 24, North Texas playing number 20, Tulane. This is a Friday night game on ABC. Jace, who you got?
Quick note, Farbod and I are picking just straight up money lines. We're not going to do spreads for the national championship, or from here on out, most likely. I'm going to take Tulane. Jake Retzlaff, I'm going to root for him in this game. It's a fun game, battle of 2 coaches leaving their program, so we'll see what pans out. I'm mainly doing this to be on the opposite. Farbod picked first this week because he had won last week. I'm mainly just doing this one, so Friday night we have an opposite one to root for.
Yes, I'm taking North Texas. Like Jay said, I'm picking first. I think. Look, both teams have a coach that's leaving. My mentality of this was North Texas can light up the scoreboard. Tulane can play bully ball. This might be embarrassing. I told Jace my analysis of this game was which coach wants to get to their next destination faster, and I think John Summerall probably wants to get to Florida faster than Eric Morris wants to get to Oklahoma State. Texas is going to be more dialed. They're going to be more ready. I think North Texas is going to win this game. Big 12 title game. This has all the implications in the world. Texas Tech, they're a 12.5-point favorite against number 11 BYU. This is Saturday noon on ABC. I took Texas Tech. I think I know this is a cop-out because maybe they wouldn't be this dominant in like the SEC or the Big Ten. But I truly believe you change that conference patch on their shoulder, they would be like the number 1 or 2 team in the country. Obviously, they lost to BYU, but they're so dominant and they're so fun that they would be so easily marketable.
But yeah, if they had this roster, Joey McGuire, 11-1, and they're on an SEC patch, they're number 3 in the country, and no one bats an eye. People would probably make the argument for them to be over Ohio State or something like that. With all that said, I'm going to ride Texas Tech as well. I just think they're like you said, they've just been dominant. They dominated BYU first time around. I think they're going to do it again.
We already went over our SEC championship pick. You had Georgia, I had Alabama. We went over Big Ten. We both took Ohio State over Indiana. All right, the 5th conference, the disgusting matchup between number 17 Virginia is a 3.5-point favorite and unranked Duke. If Duke wins it, they're technically a conference champ. I mean, they are a conference champ, but they're probably going to still miss the playoff as a power conference champion, which is ridiculous. Saturday, 8 Eastern on ABC. Since I'll pick first, I'll go last time. So these 2 teams have already played. I picked Duke at the beginning of the year or in the middle of the season when they played to beat Virginia, and Virginia took care of business. I think the opposite will happen. Give me Duke and give me the disgusting scenario of trying to convince yourself to put an 8-5 Duke into the college football playoff.
Over James Madison, presumably going to win their conference championship. They're 23.5-point favorites over Troy. I'm going to rock with Virginia. I'm going to take Tony Elliott to win the rematch. That's a future Penn State coach. That's a name that we haven't heard his name on the grand scheme of looking for jobs. He's got a low buyout, and he's got Virginia as number 17 in the country. And how many people do you think predicted Virginia versus Duke in the ACC championship game this year? And how many of those do you think are lying?
If you had that as your only prediction, I don't care if you made like 100 predictions and that was one of them, then I'm not going to count it. But if you had that as your only prediction for the ACC, can you please tell me what the lottery numbers are?
Also, is it a bad look? I go back and forth because the conference want Virginia to win this game. for the playoff? Like, are we gonna watch a ref show? Just like they're like, we have to have Virginia win so we can have a playoff team. And do you think if
And
Virginia
maybe.
loses, this impacts Miami's chances at all? Do you see that? Sorry to keep the show going, but it's questions I have.
No, if Virginia loses, Miami's more likely to get in.
I think I agree with that.
If BYU loses, Virginia loses, Miami is more likely to get in because Miami at that point, the conference is going to be like, this is a playoff that was built, structured, funded. I know they allow the group of 5 teams in there, but it was built, structured, and funded for the Power 4. And if you're telling me one conference isn't going to get a team in there, they're all going to revolt. So Virginia loses, Duke wins, Duke's not good enough, Miami's in. That's how I feel about that.
There's your rooting alliance, Notre Dame, Duke, Texas Tech, Georgia.
Exactly. On that note, it's been one hell of a show. Jace left me at some point. Well, he's left me multiple times. He took the Penn State head coaching job. We talked about conference championships. We talked about head coaches. Jace, we could go on even longer, but I would like to stay engaged with my lovely fiance, so I should get off of this show. What a show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at F4Discussion, on TikTok at flag4discussion. Wherever you get your podcast at Flag4Discussion. And I have to point out, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our shows on YouTube, you might be able to see fun graphics like Jace as the Penn State head football coach. Jace, you got any more things to say about this?
I'm getting a call from Chris Henry Jr. I think he wants to join me at Penn State. Sorry, I gotta go.
Hey, by the way, we did an hour and 40-minute show, and we didn't bring up National Signing Day more than once. All right. We'll talk about that more. See you on Selection Sunday. It's going to be a crazy weekend. Enjoy your conference championship. Thank you so much for tuning in. From myself, Farbod Merkazi, and the future head coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions, Jace Hatfield, this has been Flag for Discussion.